Jemma Green.
Thank you, Peter. Good afternoon. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional landowners, the Whadjuk Noongar people, and pay my respects to their elders, past and present. For those of you that think that the blockchain is something that belongs in a toolbox in a shed, I will start with a simplified explanation of the concept. So where the internet revolution has up until now given us lots of ways of sharing information and distributing that information in a more controlled way, controlling the distribution of that information and authenticating it has proved quite elusive. In particular, if you want to ensure that there's just one true copy of something that everyone can pass around and no one can alter, that up until now hasn't been possible. It's important that when I give you a $1 bill or a $5 bill or a concert ticket, that you know that is a real version of it, and that someone hasn't made a copy of it. So when you go to the concert and get that ticket swiped, that it actually works and lets you in to see the Adele concert. So, but with the advent of the blockchain, we have finally figured out how to make sure that there's actually a single version of information amongst peers, and just as important, that no one in the group can alter or duplicate the information without group authorization or prevent a phony timestamp by a malicious user. And this central problem of distributed control is the issue that is solved by the blockchain. And it's why suddenly a whole host of applications and technologies have suddenly popped up for storing value, certificates, and medical records are emerging. And this seemingly small change has allowed us to be able to transfer value over the internet without the need for a trusted third party, which is normally called a bank. And there's no need for a third party, as trust is implicit and inherent in the blockchain's technology design. And this is why this era is being called the Internet of Value, because the new technology promises inviolable security, and it's set to trigger a revolution in all institutions concerned with value, including banks, companies, payment processors, energy markets, and so on. They're all pretty much on notice. So I'm going to talk with you a bit more about the blockchain and some of the applications. But first, I just want to start off with the call that I received from Bill Ty, which was Sunday the 27th of July. And basically, he texted me at 8 o'clock in the morning and said, "Can you come to the British Virgin Islands to Sir Richard Branson and my blockchain summit?" And my husband was a little bit perplexed, but he was very supportive of the idea when he realised how much fun he was going to be missing out on. And I said about booking flights, and that was 4 flights and 36 hours of flying. And I took my 20-month-old daughter, Amelie, with me, and that's a photo of her when we arrived on the island after 36 hours flying. She was a trooper and didn't cry at all, but I'd just like to show you the photo of her after 4 days on Necker Island. So we both transformed from the Perth winter into the excitement of being there. And these are all the people that we were hanging out with. And the Blockchain Summit is basically looking at how the blockchain can be applied for social good. So this conference is really looking at applications that might have commercial uses, but also for social benefit. And this is the 3rd summit that has been held on Sir Richard Branson's Necker Island, which is in the British Virgin Islands. So we had to fly from Perth to Dubai, Dubai to New York to Puerto Rico, and Puerto Rico to Tortola in the British Virgin Islands. And the other speakers included Brian Ford and Michael Casey from MIT, Imogen Heap, who's a very famous singer from the UK, Conservation International President Jennifer Morrison, Sadia Marsberg from the Rockefeller Foundation, Yong Sun from Samsung, and then also Elizabeth Rosiello from BitPesa, who I'll talk to you about in a moment, and also the founder from identity startup Civic. So it's quite a number of people doing things in the blockchain from a very diverse landscape of sectors. And so Richard Branson on our first evening said that blockchain could change the world in an incredibly positive way, and it's the people in this room that will make it change. And he said that, that something magical happens at each of these conferences, but most of it, the magic happens afterwards. And I'll share with you a bit about some of those things that I've witnessed happening both in my own personal circumstances, but also in that of some of the people at the summit. So I mentioned Bill Tighe. He was actually the person that invited me to the conference, and Bill is an innovator in residence and an adjunct professor at Curtin University, and he's been a serial venture capitalist and entrepreneur dating back to the 90s. He's also one of the early pioneers of the blockchain. So it was very nice to get to know Bill a bit more, as well as knowing him from Curtin University. And this is BitPesa, Elizabeth Rosiella. She actually, as an American lady, founded BitPesa to reduce the cost of transferring money in Africa. There's a lot of intermediaries that charge large sums of money to move funds across Africa, and the alternative is actually to move cash, which is even more costly and also risky. So she now is based in Kenya and had 2 children there, and she was talking about the profound difference that this has made in being able to move cryptocurrency, which is an instantaneous transfer of funds from one country or place to another. And it's made money transfer much more secure in Africa. And she basically was talking about the difference that it's made in increasing both the security and reducing the cost of transfer of funds. And you can see money transfer using cryptocurrency is prevalent not just in Africa but other parts of the world as well. Another person that was at the conference is Roya Mahbub, and she is an Afghan lady who's now based in New York, but she's set up a serial entrepreneur as well. Her latest venture is called Digital Citizen Fund, and basically many women in Afghanistan don't have ID or even bank accounts, and she wanted basically to give them a way of having financial independence. And so she's using Digital Citizen Fund to teach girls about blockchain technology, including Bitcoin and Ethereum, and how to code, and also financial literacy so they can manage their own money, and helping them to set up their own businesses. And Roya, who was named in 2013 as one of Time's 100 most influential people in the world. So it was a big honour to meet her. And her latest venture that she's setting up in New York is actually selling coffee using blockchain technology to track the provenance, and using the proceeds to forward her ventures in Afghanistan. So you can read about some of her work actually in Forbes. They just did a profile piece on her about 2 weeks ago. Also Bitfury, of which Bill Tighe is on the board of. Bitfury do Bitcoin mining, but they have a number of other Bitcoin projects as well. And one of them was looking at land registry in Georgia, which had become a big problem. So Georgia in the Caucasus of Eurasia, because of the war, many of the land title records were destroyed, and using blockchain technology, they have updated all of the records to be an inviolable and impermeable record, and they've virtually eliminated a lot of the land theft that was going on there, and they're now rolling out the same technology in the Ukraine and looking at other countries. So, and also in addition to Bitfury talking about this, a famous economist called Hernando de Soto was at the conference speaking about how land titling can be used as a way to get people to create their own personal identities as well. And he's done a lot of work in South America and also in conflict countries looking at that. Imogen Heap, I mentioned, she has set up a movement called Mycelia for music. A lot of artists have no idea when or where they might get paid for their songs being played in other countries, and she was explaining that all of a sudden she'll just get a small sum of money in her bank account, and it could have been from somebody playing it on the radio 2 years ago. The reconciliation process for digital music and rights payments is very long and opaque and tedious. And in places like China, for example, there's actually no system to ensure that artists there get remunerated for when their music is played. And so she's looking at and advocating how the music industry could use the blockchain to create a more efficient remuneration system so that artists can get paid and create more of their works. Then the next thing that I thought might interest you to know about is a West Australian lady called Paula Taylor, and she has set up what's called the WA Ocean Foundation, and a term that she's called a Mission Blue hotspot, and the first one is in Western Australia on the Abrolhos Island. She announced it at NECA, and basically using blockchain technology and tokens, they're developing a biodiversity app using the blockchain for the data collection and recognition of species in the region, and there'll be broader use of the technology for collection of data for research purposes. So the Abrolhos Islands is the first hotspot, and there are others that they will be announcing soon along with the deployment of their app. And then just on that, Paula Taylor is the Executive Director for AusApp Awards and West Tech Fest, which is an annual summit that happens in Perth in December, and it will go from the 4th to the 10th of December. And this year they're hosting a one-day addition to the conference on the blockchain, and it's called Unblocked, Blockchain and Crypto's Role in Shaping the Future. If you go to ausapp.com.au, you can register your email to find out more about that conference. And so this is actually what the summit looked like. We had morning sessions that went from sort of 8:30 in the morning till lunchtime, then we had a few hours off in the afternoon, and then more conference from say 5:30 to 8:30, followed by dinner. And so this was actually day one, talking about the blockchain in government and finance. And this was the afternoon session on the island. This was by the beach house. And I'll show you some of the photos. So there's about 300 pink flamingos on the island. They are native to British Virgin Islands, but Sir Richard Branson has reintroduced them here. And there's a lot of nature. So this is my daughter Amelie playing with a lemur, and also with a tortoise, giant tortoises. These are not native to the BVI, they are from Ecuador, but they're very friendly. And I managed to take this photo of Sir Richard Branson with my iPhone doing a bombie in the water. And this was everyone piled into the swimming pool, and this was, I got a photo with him both drenched. It wasn't exactly how I'd hoped my photo with Richard would be, but... and then just a few other people. So Vinny from Civic. Civic is around identification, authentication using the blockchain. So many people in the world do not have ID, and using their technology, corporations and countries are able to say, if you can validate that you regularly top up your phone minutes and some other parameters, we can authenticate your ID, and the person actually holds their identification themselves. So it's not held by a third party. And if they want to provide a validation of their ID to somebody, they hold control of their identification, and to do that, which I thought was very exciting. And then Peter mentioned in the introduction that my PhD research was the reason why I stumbled across the blockchain and set up Powerledger, and he was absolutely correct. Basically what happened was in my PhD research, which is in disruptive innovation looking at solar and battery storage, I saw that in Australia we have nearly 20% of households with rooftop solar, but most of those are in houses, and hardly any in apartment buildings, which is about 30% of the housing supply. But the legislation which governs these buildings, strata law, means that the building can sell electricity to the tenants without a retail energy licence. And recognising that, I set about designing a solar and battery system for an apartment building, and realised that I was trying to find a piece of software that could allocate units of electricity to each apartment building, and that if they weren't home to consume their allocation, they could trade it with their neighbours, and I couldn't find any software that did that. And at the beginning of last year, I was introduced to a couple of blockchain developers and started investigating what is this blockchain and how does it work. And I got very excited about it. And Peter probably remembers I became slightly obsessed with it, and the obsession has remained, and saw that actually it could very transparently allocate units of electricity to each apartment building, and if you weren't home to consume your allocation, you could trade the surplus with your neighbour. And I introduced these blockchain developers to a guy called David Martin, who had been in the energy industry for a couple of decades, giving away his age then. He saw a problem in energy networks where the network is being used less as people install more distributed renewables and soon storage. And for network businesses, this spells trouble because they want to maintain the utilisation of the network, because every time electricity touches the network gets paid. And he thought that if you reimagine the network as a trading platform, as a transactive grid, the blockchain could enable that transactive grid to take place. So small transactions of electricity, citizens could sell electricity to each other peer-to-peer, and the blockchain would enable that, the registry of all the transactions and the settling of financial payments off the back of it. And so in May of last year, we decided to set up Power Ledger, and we've developed those two products for those purposes. And the first place we've been just deploying the apartment building product is at WGV, which is Landcorp's development in Whitegum Valley in Perth in Western Australia. And I mentioned the electricity network. Electricity basically for the past century has been a one-way street, but in the past 10 years really, a new system is emerging, and it's not just in Australia, it's in all developed countries around the world that have energy grids, and it's becoming a bi-directional system. So it used to be generation assets, transmission lines, distribution lines bringing electricity to consumers. But the new energy economy is characterised by bi-directional flows, small-scale generation, which sits in the distribution part of the network. So a distributed energy future is emerging, and as battery prices come down, we will see more of this occurring. As electric vehicle prices come down, which are driven by battery prices, we'll see more of that, and EVs are essentially batteries on wheels. And so we're moving to a new energy paradigm, and there are technologies which can enable the maintaining of utilisation of the grid, and we set up Power Ledger basically because we believe it can help with this energy future. And the blockchain, why the blockchain? Well, it is very fast and cheap and secure to settle multi-party transactions, which is peer-to-peer trading. The other is that you can form very safe and secure dynamic trading ecosystem. So you might have a part of the blockchain which looks at the Sydney market or the London market for electricity. It's also autonomous. It doesn't need a third party. It doesn't need an exchange or an intermediary. It can handle, I don't know who I'm selling my electricity to, but I can trust that the platform will record the information correctly and pay me accurately. And so it's called a trustless system for that reason. It doesn't need an intermediary. You don't need to wait 3 days or 60 days to be paid. It can happen virtually instantly. And so there's a lot of benefits. So in electricity markets, the wholesale market's 60 to 90 days to settle payments. So it's very inefficient, and it's because it takes so long to reconcile the information in all the different databases. And even our electricity bills are every 60 days because of the time taken to reconcile all the information. So it can basically improve the financial payments and payback period for investment in renewables. It also fixes the split incentive for tenanted properties. If you've got either a house or an apartment building, you can get the tenant to pay their electricity bill for the solar that they've consumed, which provides an income stream for the landlord to justify investing in renewables. It can increase the utilisation of the grid, as I mentioned, and therefore its relevance, because the last thing we want is lots of people peeling off the grid, and the people left using the grid are the ones that can afford it the least. The grid is a very valuable resource in my view, and that was one of the findings of my doctoral research, that even with the best payback period, not everyone can afford solar panels. Being able to purchase renewable electricity from other people that have surplus supply is a way to give access to everybody. And the grid is also important for inner parts of cities where even With a lot of rooftop solar, you're never going to be able to provide enough electricity from a high density building. So the grid's needed to provide electricity to the inner core of cities and also for essential services. So there's a whole range of reasons why it's important, and so therefore we need to get the market conditions right to maintain the utilisation of the grid and therefore its relevance. It can also decrease wastage in electricity transmission, because there's a lot of electricity line losses from moving electricity via the transmission network to the distribution network. And if you can instead have localised electricity, there are less loss factors. I mentioned the deployment at WGV, and this is some of the news that we received in the Australian Financial Review. Our first peer-to-peer trial was in Busselton at the National Lifestyle Villages, which went from August to December 2016 last year. And we've also done peer-to-peer trading in Auckland in New Zealand with Vector, and that was including financial services as well. And Bank West have provided banking facilities to Power Ledger, which is really great because it has been hard for some blockchain companies to get financial services. And we're really, really grateful for their support. And then the other thing is an ICO. Who has ever heard of an ICO? Quite a few of you. So it's called an initial coin offering. It sounds like an IPO, but it's not, even though the headline on the Australian Financial Review article says that. But essentially, blockchain companies use coins to manage their ecosystem. So the Bitcoin blockchain manages itself by, you have a complex mathematical problem. If you solve that, you get given a Bitcoin. Different blockchains manage themselves differently, but they can sell their coins to people that are interested to participate in the market. And for the Power Ledger blockchain, we've created what are called power tokens, and we are presently selling about 35% of the total volume that we've created. And the power tokens will be used by utilities on the system to onboard users and get people to trade electricity in tokenised format, which is what we're calling Sparks, a tokenised unit of electricity. So we're doing the first ICO in the Australian market, and we'll be launching that this coming Sunday. So it's quite exciting. Now, I mentioned my talk is about the Philosopher's Stone, and when I read about graphite, actually, the Nobel laureate who discovered many of the properties about graphite said that he thought that it was like the Philosopher's Stone and it had seemingly endless properties. And blockchain has a similar feeling. After visiting Sir Richard Branson's island and hearing about the many different applications in sectors, you can start to see why it could have a very profound impact on humanity. Everything from tracking the provenance of diamonds and making sure that you're not purchasing conflict minerals or blood diamonds, to making sure that financial services are being delivered without gouging consumers, to how do we solve some of the problems with our electricity to get low cost and low carbon power. So there are so many different applications, and it's only very early days, but I think that it's safe to say that that we haven't seen anything yet, and hopefully the blockchain will restore some trust through transparency to our institutions. So on that note, I'll take questions. Thank you.